I'm going to call the October 16, 2024 Williamsburg Planning Commission meeting to order. Heather, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Hamilton? Ms. Bowe?
Here.
Mr. Tarley?
Here.
Mr. Boswell?
Here.
Mr. Granger?
Here.
Ms. Liebel?
Here.
Mr. Phillips?
Here.
Okay, thank you. We have to approve the minutes from our meeting on September 18. There were several substantive changes made after the minutes were posted on Friday. Are there any changes that anybody wants to make to the minutes as they are posted currently? Hearing no changes, I will ask if there is a motion to approve the minutes as submitted from September 18, 2024.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Bowe? Aye. Mr. Tarley?
Aye.
Mr. Boswell?
Aye.
Mr. Granger?
Aye.
Ms. Liebel?
Aye.
Mr. Phillips?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to our open forum, which is an opportunity for anyone to address the commission on matters that we're not going to have a public hearing on today. And that's going to include the site plan for the William & Mary Real Estate Foundation, because that's on our consent agenda for today. So it means it's not going to be, there's not going to be a presentation and there's not going to be a discussion. It's just going to be a vote. So if you are interested in speaking about the Gates Hall site plan, now would be your time. And I do have a couple of speaker cards. Mr. Cote and Mrs. Cote, yours came in at the same time, so you decide who goes first.
Thank you, Chair and members of the Planning Commission. My name's Laura Cote, and I live here at 12 Cole Lane in Williamsburg. You've seen me here before on other issues relating to trees, and I'm here again about a certain tree on the site that is going to be cut for the project. It's an American elm tree. It's about 135 years old and is perfectly good health. So basically, it survived the Dutch elm disease of the 30s through the 80s. It's like one of the only last existing trees in this area. Most of them were dead, or they're hybrids at this point, but this is actually a real, and if you look at the photographs of Brown Hall in 1930, it's there. And it has a 51-inch diameter, and it's really old. And I was just, as a landscape architect, and, I studied at University of Connecticut, where we had like a living arboretum on campus, and I see William & Mary as that with all the big trees, and I'm seeing it chipped away little by little with the tree removal, a little one here, one there. And it's like back at my college, if I go back now, after the sports money came in, every single tree on campus that was part of our studies in woody ornamentals and landscape architecture is gone, and it's just brick. And if you go back now, it's just so sad. And I just don't want to see that happen to William & Mary, and I think that there's a way to save this one tree on the corner, if possible. I know there's a courtyard that's, 34 feet. If I was a landscape architect on this, I would have seen that tree as the canopy, the shade it provides, the under the canopy feeling that people get. They love this tree. I interviewed, I'd say 100 people today walking by, and everybody loves this tree, and they're really sad that it's going to come down. And as a beautification of the street, if you're walking down the street and you see this tree with the new building behind it, the tree adds value to the real estate. It adds value to this new building. If you could preserve the tree on this corner, not all of them, but that one on the corner that's right on the edge, it would just enhance the new building. And I think without that tree, it's just going to look just really bare, and we're going to lose that great tree that everybody loves. So that's all I have to say on that.
Thank you. Mr. Cote?
Good afternoon, Planning Commission. So yeah, just to piggyback a little bit on what Laura was saying about the tree. So I don't think it's an either-or proposition. You don't have to cut the tree down to build the building. You could have both on that site. If you guys are familiar with the site plan, it shows two individual buildings, an east addition and a west addition. So if you combine those two, which is like a 35-foot courtyard in the middle, and combine it into one building and basically push the building back, you could have enough room in the front for a courtyard, like you said, and have it shaded by that tree. And it not only would save on air conditioning costs, of course, for the building because of the shade, it was also construction costs would be reduced as well, because you two less exterior buildings that you'd need to have instead of just have one large building. I understand when you're designing a plan, it's always a lot easier to have like a blank slate and not have to worry about anything existing there. So I don't think when they did the original design, they took trees into account at all. I think they just kind of went with a blank canvas and just built the building based on that. So if they could consider the tree, I think they could make some changes and be able to save the tree. So I know you're making the decision on it today, so you can't really do that, but I just ask if you go to that site, if you're not familiar with it, and kind of visualize that location without that tree there and see how different it would be if the tree had been removed as opposed to keeping it there. So anyway, thank you for your time. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, sir. I have one other speaker card, and it just says agenda items, and I'm not sure, that's Ms. Kaiser. I'm not sure which you wanted to speak about, if it's something for the open forum, if it's, okay. I see your sidekick is here as usual.
How is everyone? Good? I have this odd connection between the two items that are on the agenda. One is converting a dormitory on campus to office buildings. The other is converting commercial space that apparently cannot be rented to living space. And I just think it's this huge disconnect that the college, which is under criticism on several fronts by spending a huge amount of money, yes, to update dorms, but is giving us, in this town, we get 5,000 on-campus rooms for 5,000 on-campus rooms, which means there are still approximately 5,000 students, undergraduate and graduate, who are victims of the housing crisis, quote unquote, that we have in town. And so taking a dormitory and turning it into office space seems counterproductive to that goal. How do we find housing for more students without exacerbating a housing crisis in Williamsburg? The other side of that is that there are commercial spaces well within reach of that dormitory that could actually be rented by the college and thus kill two birds with one stone, if you follow me, that the offices that are supposed to go into Brown Hall could actually rent the commercial space over here at Midtown Row that can't seem to be rented, and then you have a solution that doesn't seem to cause another problem or doesn't exacerbate the flip side of the coin. Am I making sense? Did you lose me?
No.
Okay, you're not supposed to answer me, are you? Sorry.
But I will.
I feel like we're picking at edges of a problem and just shooting things out there to try to solve something, and it ends up creating more problems. I understand that planning meets here, and the city council meets here, and economic council is over here, and the college is way over here, but we're feeding off of each other's issues instead of solving it citywide, in my humble opinion. Okay, did that
Thank you.
make sense?
Yes.
Because I kind of lose myself in all of that, but okay. So we have commercial that can't be rented, and we have living space that's going to be taken over by commercial office. That would be a handy trade, wouldn't it? Okay.
Thank you. This is still an opportunity, the open forum, for anyone else to come up and speak about anything that is not already on the agenda for today. Anyone else? I'm not seeing anyone else. I'm going to go ahead and close the open forum. That brings us to our consent agenda item, SPR 24-017. Because it's on the consent agenda, we don't have a presentation. We don't have discussion on it. Is there a motion to approve SPR 24-017?
Are you open to?
Is there a motion to, hearing none, is there a motion to recommend denial of SPR 24-017? Unless you want to remove it from the consent, if you want to discuss it, we have to remove it from the consent agenda.
I would like to remove it from the consent agenda so we can discuss it as a group here.
Okay, that's the process. So,
And I think
okay,
that
it is off the consent agenda. And Mr. Granger, your thoughts?
I have the pleasure of being on this committee or commission, and also sitting on the site plan review committee. And I will say that I am very appreciative of your comments about the tree, and I did not take into consideration in the site plan committee what trees were going to be removed. I don't know that I recall an indication in that meeting as to what trees were going to be removed. And so I really value the comments. And I was looking over here at her screen to see if she could find a picture of the tree and help me understand a little bit better.
I think it's this one.
There
This
is one
one?
on
On the corner?
Ms. Cote?
Is it this one? On the corner? Like at the very corner of the property?
Yes.
Not this one? What's this one? It is pretty big.
Yeah, so if you're looking at the front of Brown Hall, it's the far right. Far right. Yeah, so that's it.
What's that one?
That has to come out anyway. That one on the far right.
Are they both elms? What's the average like lifespan of one of these trees? Sorry.
There's a town in Maine, Sistine, Maine, and it's called the Elm City by the Sea, and is painted quite often, and they have 200-year-old American elms up there. For some reason, the Dutch elm disease, maybe it was because it was so cold, the beetle couldn't bring it there, but they have, their entire city is just giant elms. It's amazing, and I have photographs of that too, but yeah, it takes up, pretty much shades the whole the shoe area. It shades everything there. If you look overhead on Zillow, you can see that tree just is a giant green round circle.
Little round.
Yes, that's the tree. That's it. It's magical. There's nothing wrong with it either. It's perfectly healthy, and there's only a few actual Dutch elms that are original. Most of them now are 14 of them are hybrids, but this tree is actually one of the original Dutch elms. With the DNA is very valuable as well for scientists. That's it.
Okay, so let's pull it back in. And
Mr. Boswell, I'm sorry to interrupt. A point of order. Removal from the consent agenda requires a majority vote of all the members. I'm not sure if we had an actual
requires a
vote.
majority vote? Okay,
Yes, it does.
okay.
I second the motion.
Okay.
Aye. I have to wait.
So
Sorry.
I
there
think
was
she's
a
got to
motion.
call the
Who
vote.
made the motion to remove it? Mr.
I
Granger?
moved that it be removed from the consent agenda.
Yeah.
Thank you. Ms. Bowe?
Aye.
Mr. Tarley? Mr. Boswell?
Aye.
Mr. Granger?
Aye.
Ms. Liebel?
Aye.
Mr. Phillips?
Aye.
I've been on the planning commission for 7 years. That's the first time it's ever happened. So thank you, Mr. Thank
Thanks
you,
for
Mr.
keeping
Lambert.
us in order.
Thank you, Mr. Lambert, for that's why he's here. Okay, so Mr. Granger, I
So-
believe you were speaking.
I think in a town where we value history as much as we do, and the aesthetic beauty and green space, I think this is a wonderful conversation to have. The result of the conversation, we don't know what it'll be, but I know myself, when I'm looking at plans in the future, I'll ask about the things that I usually ask about, but I'll also ask what trees are going to be removed, because I think that's a very relevant topic. And I don't know if it's appropriate to ask the applicant to come up and share their thoughts on why that tree needed to be removed from the project, or if that's practical.
Mr. Lambert, is it possible for us to table this?
It's possible, yes.
Because I don't want to get into a work session here, and I don't want to revisit, and I don't want to ask people to speak on things that they're not prepared to speak on either.
What about if we moved it from the consent agenda item, denied the site plan, the current site plan, would it go back to site plan review?
I think it would just go to council, at which time they might be able to address the situation in council.
I think we're final on site plans, so
Okay.
it doesn't go to site.
That's
to city
correct.
council. Is that right? So we either deny it, and then it goes back to, if it's denied here, it goes back to,
Mr. Chairman, if I could, the applicant is here, and he's brought people that I believe can speak to the question about the tree, if
Okay,
the planning commission so
okay,
wishes.
if you're prepared, if you have somebody that's prepared to speak to that, please do.
Hey there, Logan Hall with the William Mary Real Estate Foundation. A couple of things about that particular tree. I think there's a conflict between preservation of historical architecture and preservation of the natural elements that the folks mentioned. So that tree that we're discussing right now has actually grown to a point where it's damaging the historic site wall that's on the property. So that is actually part of our efforts of the project, is to restore that site wall. Secondly, the health of the tree, I think, is a bit subjective, and I say that because there have been claims that the ongoing archaeology work has actually damaged that tree to a point of no return. That's independent of us. We did not perform that archaeology work. That was done by others. So from an architecture standpoint, I can tell you that the architecture firm is very well versed in the city of Williamsburg. They've come before you and ARB and others plenty of times. They're very good at what they do. And the footprint of the building was determined based on historical precedent and vernacular. And so that's why the footprint is where it is. Obviously, our intent is not to go in there and just kill trees for the sake of killing trees, but at some point we have to decide, I guess, what are we going to prioritize, the historical fabric of the architecture or the historical fabric of the landscape architecture? Because in this case, I think they are in a bit of a conflict. And so where we landed is our best solution. Take any questions?
Were there other questions that, all right, thank you, sir. Would anyone else like to speak on you have about 30 seconds left of your 5 minutes.
Seconds. I think you're mistaken on your health of that tree. I was there during the excavation and watched the tree roots on both elms. The one in the middle is damaged, but they came within 30 to 35 feet of this tree root. So this corner tree was not anywhere near the excavation. That one in the middle I know is damaged, and I talked to Chad, the new person at William & Mary, that's doing the health preservation of the trees, and we understand that one has to come out, but the one on the corner was not anywhere near the architectural digging, so the roots were fine.
Thank you. Would anyone else care to? Go ahead. Sure, why not?
All I would say is if you go out there, you can absolutely see today, unless we covered that up, groundbreaking. I'm sure there are pictures galore. That tree very much was exposed. The root bed was exposed. We were all looking at it for weeks. So I'm not going to comment specifically on the health of the tree because I'm not an arborist. I'm not a tree expert. But I can tell you that the archaeology work did take place right up next to the tree.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else like to speak about this? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close that open forum and ask for discussion. And we might need some guidance again about the question for tabling it versus denying it. Tabling it and maybe getting more information, or denying it, and where does it go if we deny it?
Or approving it.
Or approve it. Or approve it. Yeah. We know where it goes if we approve it. I'm just not sure where it goes if we deny it.
This body has the final say on site plans, so if any person aggrieved may seek redress from the circuit court.
Okay. Other discussion, Mr. Phillips?
I'm a very proud graduate of William & Mary. I'm very happy to live in Williamsburg, Virginia. I'm so glad that you brought this to the attention of this group. I'm taking what's been said very seriously, and I think that we need to be very serious about coming to a decision on this as opposed to proceeding with momentum.
Thank you. Ms. Bowe? Any further comments?
I wonder, can anybody help me understand today, the most recent Google Street Map view is from July 2023. Does this wall that's like basically abutting the tree still exist? And is that the historical wall that you said is being damaged by the tree? Because I imagine that the tree used to be much smaller.
I do agree with that. I mean, you can see the roof is going right around the base.
Okay, so we've closed the open forum already, and we're just having a discussion here. So Ms. Bowe, if you would just
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to
engage.
understand what I was looking at and if that wall was still there. That was my only
Okay.
comment.
Thank you, Ms. Liebel.
Having been the owner of a 150-year-old Dutch or American elm that came down in a storm and broke my heart after we'd been treating it for Dutch elm disease, I can see both sides of the situation. But knowing that there can be a lot of hidden damage that you cannot see, and then having a tree come down and cause some significant damage to your home is something that, and in this case, to any potential changes to Gates Hall, I think warrants consideration of the overall health of the tree and the fact that they are trying to preserve that historical wall.
Mr. Granger, you've spoken on this. Do you have more to add?
I think it's vital to have conversations like this. I think it's a great conversation to have, and for us to have it top of our minds when we're looking at site plans in the smaller committees. So I'm pleased that we removed it from the consent agenda and facilitated a good, honest conversation.
Mr. Tarl?
I don't have anything further, thank you.
Okay, because I am a William & Mary employee, I cannot move or vote on this, so I will just ask if there is a motion.
We are voting on exactly.
We're voting on
what
whatever
now?
motion is made next.
Oh.
A motion to recommend approval, recommend denial, or table, I believe. Is that correct, Mr. Lambert?
Yes. I recommend approval of SPR 24-017.
I second.
Ms. Bowe?
Aye.
Mr. Tarley?
Aye.
Mr. Boswell?
Abstain?
Mr. Granger?
Aye.
Ms. Liebel?
Aye.
Mr. Phillips?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. I had made a comment at our last hearing that consent agenda item might be about a 5-minute item, and I'm glad it turned out not to be. It's an important issue, and thank you all for your contributions, and thank you for being here as well. That brings us to our scheduled public hearing, PCR 24-022, and Ms. Griffin, the floor is yours.
Yes, hi, good afternoon, Chairman Boswell and members of the Planning Commission. The city has received a request for a special use permit from AES Consulting Engineers on behalf of BSR Midtown Current LLC. And the request is to convert 8,467 square feet of retail space into 5 apartments, specifically 2 4-bedrooms and 3 3-bedrooms at 221 Monticello Avenue, and this is Building 1. Building 1 is the one that's depicted here in the red. It is the closest to the School of Education, William & Mary, and it's on Monticello Avenue. This is Midtown Row. I know all of you know that, but just for those who may not, this is Midtown Row. It was approved originally in 2017. There have been several amendments that went on into 2018 to be approved. This was a redevelopment of the Monticello Shopping Center, around 19.44 acres. And they are requesting, again, the retail space to be converted to residential. I just wanted to go back. There's been some question about what was exactly approved in 2017. I think it's important just to go over that very quickly, just for a better understanding. So in 2017, there were several text amendments that were approved. First, to increase the percentage of gross floor area of new buildings in any lot in the B3 district. 67% of the building, if it's a mixed-use building, only 67% could be residential. This text amendment allowed for 80% to be residential. Another text amendment, it allowed for redevelopment projects to reduce the yard and transitional screening. It also increased the height of buildings from 45 feet from grade from not more than 66 feet from grade. And allowed up to 4 unrelated individuals in a student-designed dwelling. So the reason why you see the request for 2 4-bedrooms is because this property is allowed to have 4 occupants, people occupy an apartment, unlike anywhere else in the city, unless they get a special permit to have that 4 occupancy. And then lastly, same thing, it approves a text amendment to have the word designed put in front of student dwellings. This is Building 1. Issues today with this. Go back. This is Building 1, and it shows you on the bottom floor here is where the changes would go to the retail space. The gross floor area of Building 1 is 1,023.11 square feet. The conversion of retail to residential would only do a 67% increase in the residential space in that building. And I just point that out because they're not going over their 80% threshold that's allowed. And then if you look at this rendering, it shows where the conversion will actually take place. I'm not sure why it's skipping. I apologize, but you can see that's where the conversion will take place. And then there is a courtyard that will access. There will be no access to the apartments off of Monticello Avenue. I also wanted to show you, and you have this in your packet, but this is a floor plan of how it would look. At the top of the screen is where the windows would be on Monticello. You do see that there are some bathrooms and bedrooms that will be on that side. As we've seen this before, anytime there is a special use permit, there are criteria that we have to review in order to provide a recommendation. And the first is if the use is in harmony with the adopted comprehensive plan. This use is in the urban commercial land use designation for the comprehensive plan. It is in keeping, the use is in keeping with the comprehensive plan. The second is if the use is in harmony with the intent and purpose of the zoning district. The zoning district is urban business. It allows for mixed use, and so it is compatible with the zoning district. Is it in harmony with the character of adjacent properties in the surrounding neighborhoods and with existing and proposed development? Staff is suggesting that it's not, and as another slide that I'll go into more detail about that. We believe that it will not result in the destruction of loss or damage of any feature determined to be significant for scenic, historical, ecological purposes. And also, we believe it is adequately served by essential public services such as streets, drainage facilities, and fire protection. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. Staff does not believe that it's designed. We do believe it's designed and landscaped, so it will not hinder or discourage the appropriate development or use of adjacent properties in surrounding neighborhoods. We, however, don't believe that it's sited for that. So I did want to show you the trip generation. It does show that there will be a decrease in the trip generation from the retail to the actual residential. There will be less trips taken, and I apologize that it's doing this. It also, they provided us with water and sewer flows. The top table shows the average flow, gallons per minute would be 16.13 if this in the approval for retail. It, however, goes down when you add the 5 units to 14.85, which is that bottom row. We've had this reviewed by our city engineers to validate these numbers. And we also did the same with the trip generation. So in looking at staff analysis, again, like I said, we do believe it's compatible with the comprehensive plan. We believe it is compatible with the zoning designation. We don't believe that it meets the character of adjacent properties and neighborhoods. We do feel that it has adequate public service and no loss of any features. And we do not believe that it is cited, that it will not interfere with other adjacent properties. One of the reasons why we give this analysis, well, there are 5 different reasons. First, the placement of the apartments on the first floor along Monticello Avenue will detract from the ability to create the desired sense of place along the corridor. The purpose of retail along the sidewalk is to activate the street and tie into the retail across the street. We believe the conversion to the apartments removes this opportunity. Once it is afforded to be residential, it more than likely will not go back to being commercial. We also believe that before agreeing to convert commercial space, that alternative measures should be implemented that are in common practice in zoning law, zoning practice, I don't want to say law, such as determining if the B3 zoning district use regulations could be revised to provide more adequate businesses that could go in these shops along Monticello Avenue. We also think, and I'm not sure if additional incentives can be provided by the developer, such as increasing the tenant improvement fund that would help businesses be able to afford the upfit of the retail spaces, and also looking at some of the incentives that's offered by the EDA if they've taken advantage of either of those things. I wanted to go back to the, this slide. I did talk to the applicant and asked about a building, Building 3. Building 3 right now has Super Chicks, and it also has the Salon 7. And there was a question about could some of these apartments go into this area, and really to ask if there was anywhere else in Midtown Road that it could go interior and not on Monticello Avenue. And so they did provide this lease out of space that they anticipate for Building 3. So for the reasons given, staff does recommend denial of PCR 24022 because we don't believe it meets the two criteria outlined in the SPU requirements. If you have any questions, if I've left anything out of the analysis, I'm happy to go over it again and answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Ms. Griffin. Questions for Ms. Griffin?
I have
Ms. Bo?
I have a question.
Yes.
Do you know what the occupancy rate of the building is, or all of the residential buildings or spaces are right now?
I know that it is very high. I would ask to the applicant to give the exact number, but I know it is extremely high.
I would love to hear from the applicant if they have that information.
And
We'll have the opportunity.
Oh, okay.
We'll get there. Did you have other questions for Ms. Griffin?
No.
Ms. Carlo?
Do we have, I'm assuming it's not going to stay exterior, the exterior will change on Monticello from now, right?
Yes, so they have gone before the ARB. The ARB has given them approval. The only changes will be the screening. Screening, just like you see on the apartments on the subsequent floors, it'll be screened in the same manner. There are some openings that are being added. And just at the bottom, you probably could not tell the difference. But you would not really be able to tell the difference from the bottom floor.
It's brick, it will be brick exterior?
Yes, everything, and I can go back to that. Everything will stay.
I was looking more for a photo. I saw one in the ARB packet. I didn't know if you had one in your...
Yes, it's the same photo. It's this right here. That's the same photo.
Look fast before it disappears.
Yes, right there. Right there. So those are the screens, and then the additional doors. So this is after, and that one is what it is now. So you'll see where you have the larger brick area that doesn't have anything there. They've added some space there. You see the...
I still see a lot of window.
Yes, all of the windows will stay. Nothing will be changed with the windows except the screening like you see on the second through the fourth floor, fifth floor.
It'll just be into someone's home.
So the windows are staying the same, and then you have doors that are being added.
Other questions, Mr. Tarley?
No, thank you.
No questions.
Yes, could you say more about how the placement of residential units there will impede or disrupt the activation of the street as originally intended?
Yes.
And could you also say more about how that, I'd like to hear more about how it affects across Monticello, if it does, or if it affects toward the education school, if it does or if it does not. I'd like to hear much more about that concern.
Yeah, so one of the things that, in looking at this particular proposal, I did some research looking at the American Planning Association, the Certified American Planning Association, and the issue of conversion of retail space to residential is not something new. It is something that's coming up because of issues with renting out spaces throughout America just because of the retail market at this time. And so the analysis here is coming from planning thought and some things that should be done. So when you talk about the activation of the street, Midtown Road was built for first floor retail or first floor office. And so along Monticello, the point of the larger sidewalks, the point of the bus stop being there, the the bike lanes and also the bike areas for parking. All of that was to have that street activated and to people to be able to walk and to be able to enjoy the shops on that side of Monticello and also the crosswalk going across the street. So in removing the commercial elements of that, you're taking away that activation or that liveliness that could take place from the commercial that would be on that street if those were rented out.
So you're saying then that you believe it decreases the massive retail street level activity, and therefore if it got too low, it wouldn't activate?
Pretty much the viability, the commercial viability or the personal viability or the sense of place and sense of community on that street, which was one of the purposes of having the first floor to be retail.
Thank you.
Other questions for Ms. Griffin? Okay, thank you, Ms. Griffin. I'm going to go ahead and open the public forum. Mr. Getty, I believe you represent the applicant, or the applicant would like to speak, whoever.
How are you? Sean Mays. I'm the senior asset manager overseeing this project for Broad Street Realty. We are, just to clarify the kind of the situation, while I'm overseeing this project, I brought some colleagues of mine, Vernon Getty, as well as our CEO, Mike Jacoby, and Graham Corson, the civil engineer that originally worked on the initial project. They can speak to the historic aspects as well as a lot of the current aspects of this as well. I did want to address one of the things Ms. Griffin brought up about the storefronts. There really is no change. The only change to the storefronts is the configuration to allow for fire egress. In the event that there's a fire, somebody has a clear path out of the building. So there won't be any changes to how the outside of the project looks. It's still going to be storefront class. We will have blinds on the inside that will match with the rest of the building, and you can tell very little difference or see into or out of, unless the blinds are up, of course, but that's more so on the residents. I think one of the other changes that we observed in her report, which was very extensive, there was a grade change. This building sits a little bit lower and a lot further away from the parking. Therefore, retailers have no interest, or it has been very challenging to get interest from retailers, given that it doesn't serve their patrons that well. That said, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Getty, and then he'll take it from there.
Thanks, sir.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I'm Vernon Getty of 1177 Jamestown Road. Pleasure to be here representing Broad Street. And as Sean mentioned, Mike Jacoby, the CEO of Broad Street, is here with us as well. They, of course, developed the Midtown Road project. It was a $100 million plus investment into the city and revitalized those two shopping centers, Williamsburg Shopping Center, Monticello Shopping Center, in that whole Midtown area of town. They've been trying to lease the space in question in Building 1 since actually before the building was built. Been a number of years at this point, and the reality is nobody is interested in going into that space. And Mike can talk about that in greater detail than I will. They simply don't want to be there. And as was mentioned, that's not the entire first floor of this building. There will be a significant non-residential presence still with the lobby and leasing office and community amenities that are there. And they are at the far end of the building nearest the School of Education. This isn't a case where the applicant decided we want 5 more units, let's go find a place to put them. We have this empty space. It looks like it's going to be empty. You know, how can we put it to a productive use? And that's what brings us here today. As was mentioned, this proposal is consistent with the comprehensive plan. It's consistent with the B3 zoning ordinance. The look has been approved by the Architectural Review Board. doesn't change the streetscape at all. I mean, you have the nice wide sidewalk, all the streetscape amenities that are currently there remain. And we just respectfully disagree with the conclusion that this is in any way incompatible with the neighbors. And in fact, Midtown Row is the neighbor from where this particular property is located. And it certainly doesn't have any impact on development of surrounding properties, the School of Education or the commercial, already developed commercial properties across the street. I just don't think it'll have any impact at all. Given the situation, we just think it's a sort of common sense that it's better to allow this property to be put to a productive use than to sit empty with the blue leasing sign on it indefinitely. And I know Mike will address you with, I think, some other points, but we would respectfully request you recommend approval to City Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Getty.
Hello, everybody. How are you today? I'm Michael Jacoby. I'm the CEO and Chairman of the Board of Broad Street Realty. I was highly involved in all the original approvals, the entitlements of the project from inception when we bought it from, I don't know if you guys all remember, but the former Williamsburg Shopping Center was a failed shopping center. We bought it actually from a bank that had foreclosed on the center. And we bought the old Monticello Shopping Center. It was vacant and empty and in bad shape. It was owned by an estate. Actually, the family, the poor man who owned the shopping center passed while we were negotiating to purchase it. But as you recall, the corner was a tough corner for retail. At the time we purchased it, there was between the two centers, I want to say about 150,000 square feet of vacant retail space, approximately, plus or minus. I could be wrong about that. And net, after we demolished some of the buildings that were there, we end up net about 100,000 square feet less retail than there was when the site failed the first time, for what it's worth. So, just simply start with retail's hard, right? And there's a lot of factors, and I'm not going to go into that, but I'm happy to answer questions about that if anybody asks. The answer to, I'm sorry, I don't have my glasses on. Miss, I can see the Erica, I can't see the last name.
Bo.
Pardon me. Sorry, I can't see it. But the answer to Ms. Bo's question was our occupancy rate. We're 100% leased in the residential. Have been for 3 years. We've been 100% leased since the day we opened. We typically have a waiting list each year of about 100 students, plus or minus. Right now, I think the waiting list from last year was about 100, plus or minus. That's the current occupancy of the building. I want to say that our application, our desire to convert these 5 units, while it's very important to us, for a number of reasons, mainly because we have this fallow space that when we did the original entitlements, we originally tried to have all of Building 1 as a residential building. It's the primary building, all the amenities are in that building, meeting areas, library, the pool, gym, gaming spaces, it's all in Building 1. Our leasing office is all in Building 1. And for that reason, we never wanted any commercial space in Building 1 in the first place. The then planning, Carolyn Murphy, who had Ms. Griffin's role before her, planning, commission, city, they wanted us to try our best to fit as much commercial space into the project as we could. So what leftover space we had in Building 1, we just made it commercial, and we did the best we could. We've been marketing the building we've been open for about 3 years and a couple of months, I guess. We started marketing that space probably 2 years prior, so we've been trying to lease that space for 5 years, 5.5 years. In 5.5 years, while we've had a lot of leasing success on the retail side, and I'm going to actually talk about that in a second, In 5.5 years, we've toured that space once. One time. 5.5 years. That's it. From the other world. And we do a pretty good job leasing. We do a pretty good job in our other assets around the country. But I'm giving you the real number. One tour in 5.5 years of that space. That tenant never moved forward on anything, so they never moved anywhere. Again, I think while this issue is very important to us, in the scheme of what we've invested in the city of Williamsburg, in terms of dollars and time and effort, in my personal opinion, this is a molehill request. It's not a mountain request. It's a very minor part of our project, but it's an important part of our project because we want to activate everything. The very professional, more professional than I expected, presentation just made by staff. We agree with most of her conclusions except for the final conclusion. The criteria that was pointed out, criteria 3, harmony with the character of adjacent properties and the surrounding neighborhoods and with existing and proposed development. I'll just simply say this. We are the adjacent properties on both sides of the street, all the way to Richmond Road. Going the other way, it's Old William and Mary along Monticello Avenue on our side. It's all William and Mary. The parking lot is owned by William and Mary. The School of Education is owned by William and Mary. So our primary tenant is William and Mary. So I think we do a pretty good job of being in harmony with the character of the adjacent properties and the surrounding neighborhoods and with the existing development that sits on that site. In fact, I'll get into it in a second, but the closest residential buildings to us, there's a little bit of the garden apartments across the street. Directly catty corner is a building with ground floor residential right across the street. And on Richmond Road, you've got the 2 William and Mary conversions of the hotels, both with ground floor residential, for what it's worth, both of them. I just want to point out the city's ordinance does not prohibit first floor residential in any way. Again, reiterating that the 2 closest William and Mary properties are residential, and they both have ground floor residential in the 2 former hotels. The ARB agrees with us in terms of character with the adjacent properties surrounding neighborhoods. They approved our design. We had a very good back and forth like we did when we did the whole project. So they agreed with us about character of our space. By the way, just to clarify, Sean, correct me if I'm not wrong, there's a glazing across the front, right? So the big difference is there's a gray tint glazing so that you and I walking past, we really can't see in. There's blinds that will go on the inside, so at night there's no shadow, right? So someone's walking in their unit, there would have been a shadow. Now there's no shadow with the blinds inside the gray. And reiterating, except for 2 egress doors, there is no change to the existing storefront. It remains as the way it is, except we'll remove our bright blue leasing signs and replace it with the gray glazing along Monticello Avenue. Let me just say this, and again, I'm happy to go into detail, but I'm just going to give you bullets today. Retail's hard. Retail's hard everywhere, not just in Williamsburg. And I'll just point out a couple of things besides for our project. I Street was foreclosed on before the current owner bought it. Settlers Market was foreclosed on before the current guys bought it, and the current guys who bought it are about to try to sell it, and they are going to lose their shirts. The properties that we bought originally, they were foreclosed on, right? The common denominator is too much retail, just too much. That was the common denominator in the city of Williamsburg and in the parts of the region that people think are the city, but you and I know are not the city, like out at Settlers Market. Nonetheless, we're big believers in the city and the folks who live here. We have had success. I don't want to make it sound like we don't have success. Since we built our buildings, some of our retailers who moved, I'm not going to use their name, but a particular national retail, soft good retailer who might be on the corner, their sales doubled after we moved them on the site. Doubled. So of course that helps the city with increased sales tax. A certain grocer, their sales increased about 60% since we built the residential. Despite our vacancy, by the way, you could put my hand on a Bible. I swear to God, I don't know the lovely lady who, with the dog, who testified and said, why don't we convert the ground floor of Midtown Row? I have no idea who she is, but she made my point. I do want to point out, again, that's where I was, retail. I have good news, besides for the performance of some of our existing retailers. The last piece of space next to Marshall's and next to the ABC store, we have leased that space. It was leased to a soft good retailer called Plato's Closet. They'll be opening sometime in the future. We are at lease with a medical user to take the space next to River's Edge Hospital. That's about 6,000 square feet. We just leased a small piece of retail to a tea shop. We are this close to signing a lease with another QSR on the end cap of building 4 on Monticello Avenue. That was a space that we have now leased twice. The first tenant died in COVID. The space was half built. They've filled in. I feel like I'm missing another good one. Oh, and then of course the big one, we signed a brewery there called Voodoo Brewing for about 5,000 square feet, and that just happened about a week ago. So we've had some pretty good success, but the retail, prior to the retail in the new buildings is 80% dark, 80. So
I'm gonna ask you to kind of wind up. We usually allocate about 5 minutes, and so.
I appreciate it. I only have one more
Okay.
point to make. Well, 2 small points to make, and I'll be brief. I'm sorry, I'm too verbose. I apologize.
We need to focus on the matter at hand.
Yeah.
As closely as we can.
So the point is, we're asking to add 5 units. We have 240 units. We're asking to add 5 in fallow space that we've tried to lease for 5.5 years. We're not asking for 200 units. We're not asking for 50. We're not asking for 20. We're not asking for 10. We're asking for 5. That's it. None of these units access Monticello Avenue. None of this will change the character of the streets, particularly to the neighbors, because we're the neighbors. And finally, somebody pointed out, and I have no knowledge of what happens in the rest of the city, but we've been at full occupancy on the residential since we opened, and we have a waiting list of 80 to 100 people. There is absolutely demand for the units, and those are my final points.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions for the applicant? Ms. Bowe, your question was answered already. Are there other questions for the applicants?
Yes, I have questions.
Go ahead, Ms. Phillips.
So could you comment, I didn't pick this up in your comments so far, but could you comment on the current occupancy of the retail space, excluding this space, but the retail space or the retail commercial space in the Midtown Row area? What is that current occupancy? And then perhaps you could say what you expect it to be in 6 months or a year.
Sure. So I'll try to keep this real brief. There are 3 distinct pieces of Midtown Row, as the public knows it. There is the old Williamsburg Shopping Center, which is where the Food Line is, and then we demolished a bunch, we added the Marshalls. By the way, the site plan doesn't show Marshalls correctly. We amended the site plan somewhere along the way. That is a venture unto itself, and that will, until we just signed this lease, that was about 80% leased. With the lease that we just signed and the pending lease we have, that will come to 100%, the original historic Williamsburg Shopping Center. The old Monticello Shopping Center is about 85% leased, right? And
That's on the other side of the street.
that's on the other side of the street, yeah. And then there are the 4 new buildings. And in the 4 new buildings, the ground floor retail is 20% leased and 80% dark.
Thank you. And then you said that there were a couple of factors that lead you to believe that the number of businesses that wanted to take a look at that building one that we're talking about now, below grade, far away from parking. Are there any other factors that come to mind as to why that space has not been appealing?
It sits poorly to the street. That building one sits further back than the other buildings do. It's not at grade. So there's those wide sidewalks, and then there's our wide sidewalks. And there's landscaping in between, so it's set back. I'll just say this broadly speaking. In our experience at all the other shopping centers we own, which is millions of square feet, you and I as customers, we're lazy. We're just lazy people. I don't know how to say it any nicer. And people can't park right in front of their office or customers can't park right in front of the store. Our space is challenged wherever we have similar space. It's just challenged. From a practical perspective, there is no good way to load that space. So using an example of like the Virginia ABC store or the grocery stores, the hardware store, they don't like to load from the front. They like to load from the rear for a number of reasons. Starting with that's where their stock room is, and that's the dirty side. That's another practical reason. And then lastly, if you really sit out there, and I don't have time to go into it today, but we designed it so that all the interaction is with Building 2, Building 4, Building 3, and how they interact to Building the Monticello Shopping Center across the street. That's where the crosswalks are between 2 and 4. That's where the stoplight was moved to. And then in the rear for Building 3, there's a walk that's a large circle that goes around it. And as you know, maybe you don't know, I apologize, we activate that square all the time. We have a summer concert series. We have all kinds of events. We have our fall festival coming up, and not every weekend, but many, many weekends throughout the year, we have thousands of people in that circle. It'd be horrible to put residential on the ground floor there.
Yeah, actually, I do know. I attend those events.
Thank you for coming.
Last question then is there anything else that you folks have thought about trying to get interest in that building that you've just not done? Anything else? Because you say that you've been marketing it for 5 years.
That particular space?
Yeah, this is the Building 1 space, yeah.
That particular space, that unique particular space in Building 1, there is no tactic I can think of that we haven't employed or tried.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions for the applicant, Ms. Bill? Oh, sorry. Ms.
Yeah,
Leibel?
so
go
I
ahead.
do have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Getty said that since before the building was built, no one was interested in that retail space
Yeah.
because it was away from parking. So that seems to me to be a matter of poor design on the owner's part to not have put more parking adjacent to an area where there was supposed to be retail as part of the plan for a mixed-use building. There are 9 parking spaces out in front, which I believe the city granted and took away street space in order for there to be 9 spaces. There's a very small sign that says no resident parking. I was there last night at 7 o'clock. There were 7 cars parked in that area, and they were all resident cars. So the question is, who enforces the no resident parking, and why did your organization not do more due diligence about making that space marketable in the design process? Because it sounds like it was set up for failure from the very beginning.
That is a great question. We don't, correct me if I'm not wrong, we don't control the spaces in front of the building on the street. The city controls those spaces. The ones along Monticello Avenue?
Yeah.
Yeah, the city controls that. We don't control
The
it.
sign is in fact a Midtown Current sign.
Could be, but we don't control that. In other words, if there was a resident, we enforce parking on our site pretty rigorously as it relates to the residential tenants. We can't and don't regulate parking on the public street, for what it's worth.
Is that true, Tavia? Or Ms. Griffin, I'm sorry.
It's correct, and we do not regulate parking on a public street. I'm not sure about why there would be the signage from the organization and the city would be responsible for enforcing. So that would be a question that I would have to ask our police department and our city engineer.
We do maintain the public space along Monticello Avenue. I mean, the landscaping, the grass cutting, et cetera, we do maintain that. The answer to your question is that there wasn't any place to put any more parking without building a bigger deck, and structured parking wouldn't have made any economic sense whatsoever to support the retail at all. We already knew we were going to be a little challenged. We knew leasing would be slow there. There just wasn't any good way to design any better parking. A real metric, that's about 8,000 square feet, the space we're asking to convert. If it was office space, that's about 25 to 30 people who would work there. So those 7 spaces don't do it any favors, at all. We're really well parked for retail. We're probably, a little tight on residential. And as I explained earlier, we're human beings. We're lazy. 19-year-old kids are even lazier. So we're always enforcing parking on our site, let alone the 7 spaces not on our site.
I don't have any other questions.
Ms. Granger, question?
No questions.
Ms. Lowe, I believe you had a question.
Just one more question, I think. Do you expect, if you go through with the renovation to residential units, do you expect those to come online for next school year?
Yeah, we would, I think the process would be, we're in front of City Council on November 11th? Sounds about right. And assuming we get a positive response from them, we would start construction by January 1st. And we have a fair amount of infrastructure already in place, just vis-a-vis the original construction, power, water, et cetera, as Ms. Griffin pointed out. So we don't, what's typically a long lead item, power, water, we don't have that issue.
Charlie?
No questions.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
This is still an open forum for anyone else who would like to address the commission on this application. I noticed a couple of people wandering out during those remarks. I don't see anybody else here, so I'll go ahead and close the open forum and ask, is there any discussion before we have a motion?
I just have, with respect to the effect on the surrounding area, I noticed that Building 2 has empty retail space just across the street or the walkway. And the question in my mind is, if we approve this change, is it the Camel's Nose and then the empty suites in Building 2, will they come before us for another special use permit? And when I look at the old Monticello shopping center, the amount of vacant space in that area, will we get a special use permit to convert that to residential? And so I'm concerned that it is actually true that it will have an effect on the adjoining properties, because it's the, okay, we changed that one, and now we'd like to change this one, and we'd like to change this one. And that's just, I agree with Ms. Griffin's assessment that it does have an effect on the surrounding area.
Granger, discussion? Ms. Bowe, discussion?
I guess the only thing I'll say to that is that the vacant space also has an impact on the character of the neighborhood in the area. And I was reading that, the potential net revenue, if it was all leased, is something in the $60,000 range. But actually, the city stands to gain a little bit of annual revenue from the conversion to residential purposes as well, and some, minor one-time revenues from building permits and things like that. but it's certainly not getting anything right now with the spaces being empty. And it sounds like the parties here have done some due diligence in attempting to rent the space, and they answered Bud's question that they have done as much as they can and exhausted all avenues to try and rent the space. And the fact that they still, besides that space, have only, you said 20% of the total retail space leased, tells me that it's probably not going to get to 100% anytime soon. So I think it's a minor change, and I would like to see it go to at least some kind of active use other than vacant space. So I guess that's my last comment.
Thank you, Ms. Bowe. Mr. Tarley?
Yeah, I support staff's recommendation. From context, we recently rejected a similar request in High Street for a lot more property that had been vacant for a lot longer. As Mr. Jacoby said, it's been about 3 years. 5, they tried to lease it. 3, it's been open. Commercial below, residential above. That was the plan. And as Mr. Jacoby mentioned, he wanted all residential at the beginning, but the city wouldn't have approved it. So nothing to me in that 3-year period has changed. The 20% occupancy tells me that there's something more systemic in the lack of rents of commercial tenants in that space. And I note also that one of the points on here was not addressed. Mr. Phillips asked a number of questions that were not answered directly on what else had been done. I heard nothing about additional incentives. Everyone who builds here, every commercial developer knows what parking is and what distance is from your car to your space, how that impacts things. I heard nothing about attempts to decrease square foot rent values, rent incentives. I support staff's recommendation. We've had 3 years that's commercial property that's taken offline forever, and I don't support that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tarley. One of the points that I think is particularly important is City Council's goal of providing safe and affordable housing for students and other folks who want to be close to William & Mary, and I think adding a few apartments here is consistent with that goal. So having said that, I don't think anybody had mentioned that yet, so I'll just mention that. So any other discussion? Is there a motion, and I'll make this a motion to recommend approval, to make it a little bit easier. Is there a motion to recommend approval of PCR 24-022? Is there a motion to recommend denial of PCR 24-022?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Ms. Bowe?
Nay.
Mr. Tarley?
Aye.
Mr. Boswell?
No.
Mr. Granger?
Abstain?
Ms. Liebel?
Aye.
Mr. Phillips?
Nay.
Okay, I'm not sure we're providing City Council with a whole lot of help on that, but that's how it works sometimes. Okay, thank you. We don't have site plans today. We have one piece of unfinished business. Mr. Hamilton has been serving double duty, representing us on the Arts Council and on site plan. Mr. Phillips has agreed to serve on the site plan review committee. Thank you for that. So I'll make that appointment now. He'll join that one coming up. We don't have other new business. We have a few public hearings scheduled for November 2024. Anything else we need to discuss? Okay, we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.